This week's edition of MOJO Rising How to Make Cancer Suck Less is split into two parts. This part is built specifically for doctors, so we won't waste time doing our normal intros. Let me cut right to the chase. My name is Julie Stevens, and I'm a survivor of stage 4 aggressive, inoperable, and chemo-resistant colon cancer. And I'm promoting using a palliative care approach for all cancer patients as recommended by the Journal of Clinical Oncology in 2012 and again in 2017. I was able to heal from not only stage 4 colon cancer, but also every other diagnosis I had in only 9 months by building a comprehensive strategy to both treat cancer in partnership with my oncologist and also heal the root causes with 10 other doctors and healers. In this session, we will be discussing how supplements can build up someone's body so they don't suffer during conventional treatment. For example, I had 0 side effects because I prepped my body like I was doing a marathon, so I was physically strong and in tip-top condition before I began. Never once was I too tired or too sick for work. Never once did I have to delay a treatment because my body wasn't strong enough. In fact, I was so strong, I would dress up in costume and bring a party for everyone else in the infusion center when I went. Everyone can feel that good and live in joy if we do our job and teach them how. I took and continue to take supplements so I can heal the root causes of why my body was hospitable to cancer and protect myself from the impact of conventional cancer treatment and reduce the likelihood of recurrence. I am living my best life and feel better than I ever have before, and I want that for your patients too. My story sounds like a miracle, but it was really because I studied medical school curriculum and realized what was not taught to you and found experts and other approaches to round out my strategy. I used a total of 6 toolboxes to heal: pharmaceuticals, vitamins and supplements, diet and lifestyle, exercise, and other facilitated healers such as chiropractors, acupuncturists, herbalists, reflexologists, etc. This podcast is ultimately a continuing education effort to introduce you to something that can dramatically impact the suffering of your patients. I've invited 3 of the men I respect most in this world to share their learnings with you. First off, Dr. Russell Jaffe, MD and PhD. He's worked at the NIH. He has gone on to change the world in so many different ways. He is truly one of the smartest, most spiritual, and most well-grounded men I have ever had the pleasure of interacting with. Mr. Donnie Yance, he's a master herbalist and nutritionist who is known globally for discovering the Madeira Academy. And Oscar Sierra, one of Donnie's proteges, who is an herbalist acupuncturist and truly the reason I am alive today. I brought these 3 men together so that you can help your patients not only reduce cancer burden, but not suffer while achieving the very best healing outcomes. We've also linked their bios in the notes, so if you have more questions, you can learn more about who they are. So thank you for listening with an open heart and mind. You can dramatically change the lives of all of your patients you work with by encouraging them to build a team and take responsibility. It will not only make their life easier, it will also make you and your team's life easier. So thank you for listening and welcome to MOJO Rising, How to Make Cancer Suck Less. Donnie, can you tell us how you stay up to speed on everything happening in the oncology industry?
To this day, I spend, on top of everything else I do, I spend 1 or 2 hours writing or accumulating data or reading information. And then at some point, I figured that I can't really, if I do everything right, you do everything right with someone in the realm of all the peripheral toolboxes, as they would say, whether it be botanical medicine, nutritional medicine, food as medicine, lifestyle medicine, all the things, acupuncture. And if a patient's doing the wrong things with the very strong toolbox, the allopathic toolbox, they're not going to get well. So at some point, I decided the system is completely broken and that we need a whole new system. And that's the only way it's really going to work. And so, at some point I said that I need to develop a new medical model, which is what I've done and I continue to do, and I elaborate, which we refer to as Madeira care.
Dr. Jaffe, how did you get into the field of medicine?
I did conventional internal medicine at Boston University with a PhD in biochemistry. I matriculated to the National Institutes of Health, where I did a residency in clinical pathology. I'm board certified in clin path and chemical pathology. I ran the residency program at NIH, and each year I was there, we developed a new method to improve upon the results that people were getting. For example, the first project that I worked on independently had to do with occult blood testing because there were too many false positives and false negatives. The cost of detecting an early colon cancer was too high. We found out why. Tests were falsely negative and falsely positive. We developed a method that reduced over 20-fold the cost of detecting an early colon cancer test. And this is now, occult blood testing is now done about 40 million tests a year in the United States.
What do you think is the biggest problem facing cancer patients today?
To what Donnie and I know the future needs to be, which is primary upstream prevention. 92% of your and my lifetime health are due to our habits of daily living. 8% is transgenerational influences, and yes, you can blame mom and dad for a small percentage. But most of your and my health are due to the habits we choose daily in regard to what we eat and drink, think, and do.
How do you know?
We have redefined laboratory ranges. We have personalized the outcome of the 8 predictive biomarkers and the 4 self-assessments so that you can find out if you're at your best outcome goal value and therefore most likely to live 10 or more years, or if you need help with some specific thing like sugar regulation or vitamin D or omega-3 fatty acids. And there are a few more, there are 8 of them. We surveyed 100,000 tests and we came down to 8 that cover all of epigenetics, all of lifestyle, all of the habits of daily living. We were amazed that we could do this in just 8 tests. So it's not that expensive. This is a paradigm shift. This moves us into the realm of personalized primary prevention.
Amen.
We believe in that. I mean, wholeheartedly. So, Dr. J, I want to just break this down for our listeners. As you did go to medical school, when you think about what a doctor knows about, and I think of it as nutrition, exercise, stress, vitamins and nutrients and supplements, all of it, anything that isn't pharmaceutical science, how much of that was actually learned as part of your medical school curriculum?
Well, I had just a drop at a time when there was still a drop. Today, pharmacology and pharmacoeconomics and pharmaco has pushed everything else out of the curriculum. Today, young physicians know how to use a PDA, they know how to come up with a symptom-based diagnosis, and they know how to write a prescription.
So knowing what I know about you and your background and the organizations you have founded as a result of your history, Dr. J, how did you go from having very little any education or formal education through your medical school on herbs and vitamins and supplements and things like that? You've done a number of studies with great masters in different traditional healing approaches throughout your career. But how did you come to the point where you believe so strongly in supplements that you started your own company? So what was the learning that took place there?
Well, we opened the lab in 1983. By 1987, we were already established as the gold standard for cell culture. But what I learned was that most supplements do not disclose fully what's in the product. And if they did, you might not take the product. There were binders and fillers. There were other ingredients. There were many, many common in the industry standards that contributed to poor bioavailability, to more dysbiosis, more abnormality of digestion, more maldigestion, more enteropathy, atrophy of the digestive tract, etc. So in 1987, we started PERC, the first full disclosure company. There are 40 active ingredients in our super multi-tabsule. We had to develop a novel delivery system. We want you to take enough of this with food because it's concentrated like food. We want you to take enough to keep your urine sunshine yellow. Easy. Why do we have 40 ingredients in meaningful amounts rather than 18 or 20 ingredients in eyewash amounts? Because most companies follow the Food and Drug Administration daily values. What are the daily values? The daily values tell you the minimum you need to not be deficient. They don't tell you sufficiency. They don't tell you what's optimum. Emmanuel Chereskin, on whose shoulders we stand, and Hugh Reardon, on whose shoulders we stand, are among the many leaders that showed the evidence, small but compelling. It's my privilege to extend the knowledge, the information and inspiration, the motivation to just try it. And I don't think if you just try a little bit that you'll ever go back.
Yeah. I certainly know the impact of building my body up and addressing the root causes of disease. I didn't suffer at all while I was healing from cancer. And truly, my life is tenfold better post-cancer than it ever was before, because I feel I'm stronger. I understand how I get joy. I understand how I can balance so many things. I'm adaptable. And I have relied heavily on what both of you men have done in your careers as part of my healing journey. So, Donnie Yance, I want to come to you with the same question. How did you get started understanding the value of supplements and vitamins in helping people really heal?
By firsthand witnessing people's health being improved, and supplements, everything is the right form of supplements, the right amount for that person. I think there are commonalities in what I call foundational medicine, or, the first thing I always like to address is what I call the soil or the root system of health. And that is non-specific. So I think our minds have difficulty because we're trained that everything should be specific, and concepts in natural medicine are to be gentle, to be nourishing, to build non-specific robustness, to help the body auto-regulate at the molecular level, the cellular level, the organ system level. And you do that with things, whether it's supplements or food, that have the most global benefit, that may not be sledgehammers in any way, but be gently working in this, what we call network fashion, and working in hundreds or thousands of different pathways, whether they be intercellular, whether they be epigenetic, whether they be extracellular, whatever they are, they're working to bring things into harmony in a very subtle, slow, gentle way. So I always start that. I come from, my background is in eclectic medicine. When I found the eclectics, the physiomedicalists, the people that were building this beautiful model of health in our country, and then watch it be squashed, I would call myself a scholar of eclectic medicine. I probably have every materia medica ever written, most of which I have original copies go all the way back to the 1850s, all the way through, whether it be Ellingwood, Felter, King, Lloyd, Eli Jones. These are my mentors, not just because of their great understanding of health and of medicine, but they were heart-centered human beings. They loved the truth. They pursued after the truth. Everything was about the word eclectic. I utilize that word from the eclectics, where we call the Mediri care model. In a more complex way, we call it the eclectic triphasic medical system. And so that's not just applying the word eclectic, which the eclectics actually believed: study every form of medicine, know every materia medica to best serve your patients. And so I really have adopted that. So the Mediri care model is based in traditional wisdom. There's, I would say, the model more emulates maybe traditional Chinese medicine but not at all in its purity way, but just as a because I think that the traditional Chinese medicine is the most elegant, most beautiful, the most poetic of all medical models. And so trying to adapt what that model, utilizing that model, bringing in the eclectics, bringing in Ayurvedic medicine, bringing in even European phytotherapy medicine, try to bring everything together. And I've chosen the word unitive medicine rather than integrative medicine, complementary medicine, all the other words that people use, alternative medicine. None of those really serve, because when you use the word unitive, everything is one. Everything is about becoming one, as the medicine is all one. And it's unified because to be harmoniously with each other and to create the healing that any one of those pieces onto themselves would never be able to do. So that's really a concept of unitive. And I think, people make huge mistakes going into just thinking in terms of how we understand how herbs and drugs even work, because that's always a big subject with patients and in oncology. And I said everything that's being taught is based in theory and with theoretical concepts and pharmacokinetics. They're not looking at pharmacogenetics. They're not looking at the most important thing, pharmacodynamics. And even the pharmacokinetics is completely theoretical. If this herb has one compound that impacts this one enzyme pathway, even some astronomical amount, and that drug is metabolized through that pathway, can't take it, forget it. And and as the great Sherlock Holmes says, it's a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one twist facts to suit theories rather than to build your theories upon fact finding. So we have to first look at things through a phytodynamic lens, pharmacodynamics, which is what really happens when you take this herbal formula mixed with this cocktail of drugs, and what's the outcome of the patient, because that's the only thing that really matters. And over again, we see nothing but positive outcomes with traditional formulations, even sometimes with single herbs, less so even with isolates. But when you utilize, again, the wisdom of traditional medicine and the way plants are brought together and the way plants are used in a sensible, orchestrated, musical, almost like a gourmet meal would be delivered, when people take that formula, and it makes sense to take that formula, again, based through the wisdom lens, building up a person's bone marrow, helping restore their organ systems, and helping way beyond that. I mean, the exploration in botanical medicine is almost endless. It's like now we're looking into the solar systems to understand what plants really have to offer our health. But again, it's mostly good medicine is gentle. It's slow. It's not like overnight. And we're so impressed with the sledgehammer and so impressed to see a tumor dramatically shrink at such an expense to the person. And again, that doesn't always equate to the outcome. So I like when things can improve little by little, because I believe that's true.
So, Dr. J, when you think about this, and I think we can all agree that there is some inherent resistance or fear when it comes to really building your body up and thinking outside of just pharmacology. And in fact, I spent many hours over the last weekend really digging into what the American Medical Association has identified and what they have propagated. And I will say propaganda is exactly what I would use around vitamins and supplements, being, hey, listen, you got to be fearful. You don't know what they're going to do. They're not regulated. They're not looked at in the same way that our other pharmacology is. And so everything that you hear is be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, be very fearful. But in my experience, once I leaned into really healing those root causes, my health completely turned around. And that wasn't just one diagnosis of stage 4 cancer. It was every diagnosis has been healed. So why do you think, Dr. J, there's this inherent fear or resistance to this idea that there's more to be done than just treating a particular disease?
Well, I'm going to give you the answer. When President Carter was not reelected and President Reagan came in, it was a sea change for the government. His people were looking for a few $1 billion. They couldn't touch defense. They couldn't touch HHS, Medicare, Medicaid. Many things were off the table. Who was vulnerable? NIH. NIH was a meritocracy from the late 1940s until the late 1970s. I had the best of the last. Once the government started to increase NIH budget at equal to the inflation rate, all of a sudden money got short. And biopharma came in with what were called CRADAs, cooperative research agreements. And in the beginning, these said, well, we're just going to fill your bucket and not ask for anything in reply. And of course, if you give in business, you expect over time to get. So biopharma, which used to be excluded from the academic powerhouse centers, became the funding mechanism, and the politicians of science ascended, and the true mentors of science went away because they could go anywhere. We had Nobel laureates all over the place. And they were very accessible, very nice, until one day a company called Genetic Systems went public. And a scientist was now worth $100 million. And many other scientists said, well, we're smarter than him. We're better than him at science. And labs locked up. Not to the better, to the worse. The leaders of medicine today, Don Berwick, Elliot Fisher, Senator Ed Markey, they know that what we're talking about is the future. We have to speed a transition, but even Ted Kennedy, with the help of Orrin Hatch, you wouldn't think they were friends, but they were able to legislate. Ted Kennedy tried to bring mental and physical health together. Mental and physical health are still reimbursed separately. The mind is never separate from the body, and the body is never separate from the mind. And if you're having a mood disorder, you might also have something physical. And if you have thyroiditis, you might have a mood disorder. Follow the money.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing that, as Donnie has, as I'm sure you are now. And there is a lot of platitude, there's a lot of good words that cover a bucket of fog about everything from cancer to cardiovascular disease, from diabetes to other autoimmune diseases. Digestive disorders are rampant. And we have solutions in most cases that are elegantly simple and simply elegant, but you have to understand and do them. If you understand and don't take action, that's unfortunate. Actually, that can create what's called a double bind, which I don't recommend. I recommend you investigate personally, find a team that you can work with, and trust your team. Do not listen to people outside your team, because I will say, overwhelmingly and statistically significantly, that the other outside influences do not have your personal best interests at heart. They may be well-meaning, but as a laboratorian and as a clinician, I can tell you that very often the statistics don't apply to the individual, and therefore I ignore statistical ranges. I want to know what is the best outcome goal value for a lab test, and then I want you to be at your best outcome goal value. It's doable, but it takes a little bit of perspiration to go with the information, inspiration, motivation. And I find people, when they understand slowly, carefully, caringly, and competently that you do know what you're talking about, you are part of a team, I find almost all the objections, including it costs money, go away when you show them personal value. When I ran the Princeton Bio Center, Carl Pfeiffer Center in New Jersey, when I ran that, I actually saw patients. And people would come in and say, Dr. Jaffe, it costs X hundreds of dollars. And I would say, where do you want to invest? I want you to invest in yourself. I want you to know about yourself personally and accurately. And yes, it costs more than $9.95 and with free shipping. So I think we spend too much time addressing the non-issue. When people talk about money, I think they're saying, I'm not sure that it's going to be worth my effort and the value will be there for me. So when I hear money, I talk about the value.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. But I think there's even more, and to be honest, when I was just doing amazingly, and I would walk into my doctor's office and I felt great, and I was literally coming back from a music festival in Mexico during treatment, which nobody gets to do.
Mm.
The doctor never once said, "What are you doing? Let's dig in." They said, "Whatever you're doing, keep going. We don't want to know." So they understood I had a team of 10 healers. They understood I walked in with a smile and joy and happy and a strategy and research, but they did not want to know what I was doing, which was the scariest marker to me, that they actually weren't intellectually curious. So
that's true. Now, a brief anecdote about my father. He was hit by a car, and the orthopedic surgeon says the good news is we can put his leg back together, but he will not walk. 8 weeks later, having done what I recommended, he was at the driving range practicing his drive. In the next bay was the orthopedic surgeon practicing his drive. The doctor turns around and says, "Are you Sam Jaffe?" My dad says, "Yes, look at how good I am. Wouldn't you like to know what I did?" He said, "No, go back to practicing your drive." I have empathy and compassion for people who are too busy to look the truth in the eye, because it would mean a paradigm shift. I've made them. I've participated in them. You have to be patient. But at the beginning, it looks like the face is sheer and the climb is too tight, and you can't imagine going around or understanding from a deeper wisdom perspective, or slowing down to practice a relaxation response and abdominal breathing and green dichromatic light and hormone balancing, neurochemical enhancing, simple daily activities. Why not choose health?
I have a similar story. I can remember all the way back, and when I was in Connecticut still, I had a breast cancer patient, stage 4, even brain metastases, HER2 positive. This was way back. You know, everyone learned that Herceptin doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, so she got brain meds, and I put together an herbal formula and you know, changed the protocol, and her brain meds disappeared, and she's living on and on and on, years and years and years and years with the brain meds. So I did a talk at the hospital, Stanford Hospital in Connecticut, which is, you know, the area that I used to practice in, and still have a lot of patients on the East Coast, actually. And I go into his office, I'll never forget it. And he's got Ellen's her name, and she's her pictures up on his wall. And I said, "You got Ellen's picture?" He goes, "She's my prize patient." And I said, "Doctor," I said, "either she's your prize patient and she's my patient, and that's just coincidental that she's your prize patient, or maybe what I'm doing has something to do with why she's your prize patient." I literally said that to him. So I haven't thought of that moment that I spent in his office when he actually said that to me. And Carl Pfeiffer was one of my big early mentors. Mental and Elemental Nutrition is one of my still Bible books, and Hans Selye, The Stress of Life, is also one of my early books. And I think the eustress now we all have come to know to be hormesis, a hormetic effect, which then creates an adaptive response in the body, and the body gets stronger as a result of that. So
we, certainly, I faced a lot of pushback specifically in my journey. And I think I've been collecting some other reasons why other patients have gotten pushback. So I wanted to just say a couple things and ask if you guys would do kind of a lightning round of reasons why doctors would give this pushback. So the first thing is you don't actually need anything beyond your diet. What you get in through your foods are enough to really heal your body. What would you, how would you respond to that if a doctor thought that way?
Well, for me, as Dr. Jaffe said, well, what are you talking about surviving, like still staying alive, and or are you talking about a state of optimal health? Those are two different things. And when I even just take food as medicine as a toolbox, I'm looking at all kinds of things. I'm looking about the relationship of that food to the patient. What are the patient's needs? What is the patient's, maybe they're anemic. They need to change their diet to help serve their anemia. Maybe they have kidney stones and we need to do things to serve that. Maybe they are a certain religious background that makes them have to eat a certain way. I have to work with patients. Maybe they're living in Alaska, or maybe they're living on the equator. Maybe it's the winter time. Maybe it's the summertime. What is their ethnic background? Maybe, I'm primarily Italian, so I like Mediterranean food. Like you can't, how does their family eat? Do they want to eat this way for the next few weeks or for the rest of their life?
Dr. J, how would you respond to that if a doctor says,
Well,
listen,
I dust off my copy of Abram Hoffer's book, Vitamin C and Cancer. He took a group of advanced cancer patients and he divided them in half. Half did conventional chemotherapy alone. Half did conventional chemotherapy with his intensive nutrition program. The people that did chemo alone lived an average of 6 months. The people that did his program lived an average of 120 months. That's 10 plus years. Abram was a mentor to me. We have the evidence if people are willing to look and willing to act. What I try to do is show them an analogous situation where someone has moved from surviving to thriving, from stress to enjoying life. That sounds like them. We have thousands of case successes. We have the most outcome studies in the community showing that this approach is superior to conventional care. So I no longer, unless it's an academic debate, I no longer want to try and convince a colleague that we're right, because that would mean they'd have to change their mind. And that's one of the hardest things to do when you become an expert. The evidence is very clear and overwhelming. It's just ignored by the majority of people who don't know.
and I think it's also, as I've been doing my research, the actual value and quality and quantity and nutritional expertise we're getting from the foods we eat have been diminished over time because of mass industrialization in our farming practices. So even what we're eating isn't as nutritious as it was 10 or 15 years ago.
Having worked with Quaker Oats and General Foods and Kellogg, I can tell you that the packaged goods industry, they do not consider themselves a manufacturer of foods. They are the packaged goods industry, which aims for the longest possible shelf life. Half of what young people today eat are ultra-processed food. Bob Lufkin and many, many others have shown how toxic. It's the wrong salt, the wrong fat, the wrong protein, the lack of fiber, the processing ingredients, glyphosate and phthalates and microplastic. It's everywhere except in my home. We're almost entirely plastic free.
One of the questions, or one of the pieces of feedback we keep hearing from our patients is that supplements are not FDA approved and so they can't be trusted. And that gets my heart all in a kerfluffle. So how would you respond to that, Dr. J?
I point out that personal care products and beverages are regulated even worse than food. Yes, we have a mirage of safety. That's a very good book if you want to get to the facts. The Food and Drug Administration has been taken over by the drug side. The last strong leader of the food side was Sanford Miller, and that was years ago, and he was a great guy. But when Sanford Miller went to become the provost at University of Texas somewhere, a drug expert took over the food side. We could talk for many days and many hours about how poorly regulated our foods and beverages and personal care items and supplements. And we exist as the alternative. We're full disclosure. We use only the natural, more bioavailable form. We deliver nutrients in their most biofunctional way. We've pioneered much of what we've done because somebody needs to be the pioneer, but you know the definition of pioneer? They're the ones with the arrows in their back. That's what I heard. So I had great mentors. I was always encouraged to think outside the box. Imagine there's no box. And that worked for me. We did occult blood detection. We did how collagen activates blood platelets and blood clotting. We did parasite detection. We did many collaborative studies with the Heart Institute and the Dental Institute and the Cancer Institute and the Immunology Institute, because we could.
Yeah.
No one ever said to me, if your project gets funded, someone else's project won't get funded. That just never came up. In fact, little anecdote, there was always what was called September money, because the federal government works on a fiscal year that starts in October. And if you don't spend the money by September, it goes back to the general fund and you don't have it anymore. So we were constantly looking for things to buy or spend money on in September. And then it all changed. Biotechnology, biopharmacology is now in charge. The marketing department now tells the news department what to say. I remember when the news department was independent of the entertainment division. Not anymore. Look it up. We have seen this in my lifetime. You're much younger, but in our lifetime, we have watched this coup. I talk to these people. They are upstanding citizens. I won't tell you who, but Quaker Oats is the company. And we worked for 2 years to prove that they could not get back to whole steel cut oats. They could only roll them and process them and basically take any value out of them and have them instantly soluble. If they did what I suggested to go back to Whole Foods, they would have no profit for 2 years. And any CEO knows that if you go to zero profit, you will be out the door. They talk in the food industry, the packaged goods industry, about the crave factor. They want you to crave more and more of the wrong salt, the wrong fat, the wrong sugar, the wrong protein, the lack of fiber, all the harmful chemicals, preservatives.
Why is that not FDA approved then? Like what, like again, going back to that, why are supplements not FDA approved? Do you have any background there?
We did the last double-blind placebo-controlled trial of a multivitamin, our Lifeguard Super Multi-Tabsule. We tested at the Military Medical School in Bethesda, Maryland, and we showed 100% bioavailability of the vitamins and nutrients. Because supplements are over the counter, which means they're not patentable, although we do have some patents ourselves, but another subject. Because they are basically not patentable, there's no incentive to do research studies on them. Because if you do a study and show a benefit, everyone can benefit from that research. So you have to, again, follow the money. My grandmother used to say the rents are going up and the ceilings are coming down. That's life.
For sure. Dr. J, how do you know, one of the things that I've heard, another pushback I've heard that doctors give patients is we don't actually know how much someone needs, and the bottle's not always right with dosing information. And, there's really no way to know how much of a supplement you actually need. And I don't actually think that's true. I think the bottle of supplements are not always right, but there is a way to know. So how would you suggest a doctor know, or someone work with someone to know how much of a supplement they need?
I suggest that you enroll in our online PIH Academy. 5 years are online. The 6th year will be live in a few months. We present the evidence and the protocols. We present the how to do this easily, effectively, scientifically, and with compassion and wisdom. There are several training programs that are good, but most of the training programs today are what I would call integrative light. They substitute a more natural product for the symptom that the person has. That's not what we do. And we will get ever sicker if we follow that model. So we have to change the model. That is a paradigm shift. Paradigm shifts occur slowly. First, you're ignored, then you're wrong, and then they knew it all along. Those are the 3 phases. I've lived through that several times. I want people to know that I know. I want them to know that I can explain to them, if they'll give me just a few minutes, something that will change their life for the better.
Another pushback we often get is around herb-drug interactions. So how would you respond to that as a concern for doctors?
I think if you look through the wrong end of a microscope, you won't see clearly what's going on. I think the notion that natural products interfere with pharmaceuticals is fundamentally wrong. Abram Hoffer and many others have shown that if you combine both, you will need less pharmaceuticals, you will have less side effects, you will have better outcomes, you will have more cost-efficient care, and you will have happier, healthier clients.
I'd say I prove that's true.
I commend you for what you do every day to let the world know how well and happy you are for good reason, and pay it forward. That's what I'm doing. Most of my mentors have passed, so I can't pay it back, but I can pay it forward. And I think that's a privilege.
So I did some research into the herb-drug interactions, and I understand that's there are a few situations. And
No. How about grapefruit juice?
Yeah.
It affects your cytochrome mitochondrial energy transport system. Many doctors said, don't drink grapefruit juice. I'm a whole fruit person, whole fruit and berries, good eating, good hydration. It does come back to the fact that with a lack of information, a lack of understanding, doctors are often arrogant and they're ignorant. Armed with arrogance and ignorance, they sally forth against the dragons of disease. That was taught to me by a mentor, the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. Many of the giants of medicine know the problem. The solution is a paradigm shift. That's, we hopefully will have accountable care organizations, ACOs. Brainchild of Don Berwick, a great physician policymaker and a friend. Senator Ed Markey has taken up where Ted Kennedy left off, trying to bring mental and physical health under one reimbursement mechanism. Have you seen what they serve in hospitals to sick people?
After I finished my surgery, and all they served me was sugar and processed food. And I literally said, I'm going to die if I stay here. So another concern that's been brought up has been if you take these herbs, and I think you mentioned this earlier when you were talking about your story with your mom, it can make a drug work too much or too little. So it can impact the success of a drug or, and I think ashwagandha is one of the things that has been referenced in this area. What would be your response to that?
As someone who has studied ashwagandha, it is one of many natural products that influences the cell battery or some other aspects, the Golgi apparatus. These are words that I think I understand because I've been in biochemistry for 40 years. But mostly they're just jargon. St. John's wort, ashwagandha, many natural products influence physiologic functions. So get with the program. We have evidence today of what tests to do and how to measure in a month or 6 weeks, a short period of time. Does the herb have any benefit, like improved liver function? I will just mention that Harvey Alter, who won the Nobel Prize, and I published with him in the 70s, Harvey Alter taught me, and anyone else who would listen, the healthy liver function tests are the lower half of the usual lab range. If you're in the upper half of the usual lab range, your liver is already stressed and under function. And if it's above that, that's really a problem. Really? Yes. Most doctors don't know about laboratory tests, and most lab directors don't have practices and don't, other than playing tennis and golf with their colleagues, they don't talk about what they do. I was fortunately cross-trained, and I think that's a good thing. It allows me to think, as Donnie said, what is the right next motivating step for this person in front of me now? Don't look at statistics. Don't become a statistic. In fact, I used to teach statistics at NIH. I can tell you that most people, most physicians, most clinicians, even most laboratorians do not understand statistics. They are about populations, not about individuals, not about individuals. I now take care of one person at a time using evidence-based new paradigm approaches where we know what to measure and we know when to measure it to make sure that this individual is not having a stronger or weaker reaction than someone else.
What are some of those tests? Is there anything for liver function that you would say the actual doctor should be aware of so that they can measure if that's a fear that they're holding?
Yeah, the tests of liver function, we have certain enzyme tests. Then there's GGT, gamma glutamyl transpeptidase, a very important enzyme to measure. It's also important in blood clotting. It turns out everything is connected to everything. Wow, isn't that amazing? We also need to measure your sugar. The average blood sugar is measurable by hemoglobin A1C. I no longer even measure blood sugar and insulin because they're misleading. I need the average of several months, hemoglobin A1C. Then I need to know your HSCRP, your high sensitivity C-reactive protein, a measure of inflammation, which is repair deficit, and autoimmunity. Then I need to know your plasma homocysteine. And I now need to know whether you're tolerant or intolerant to foods and chemicals. And now I need to know your vitamin D level, because if it's between 50 and 80, you are protected from many chronic diseases and discomforts and suffering. And if it's an average American value of 10 to 20, it led to a very interesting article in the New York Times by a very famous science writer, and her conclusion is it's normal. Now, this is using statistical terms. It's normal to have a low vitamin D level. Everyone has a low vitamin D level, or most people do, so don't measure. Take none a day. A lot of money is being spent on the message of take none a day. Recently, multivitamins have been shown to mostly be a placebo. They have always been a placebo. The standard multivitamins with 18 to 20 ingredients in daily value amounts have always been a placebo. We have 40 ingredients in meaningful amounts, the natural forms, and we did a double-blind placebo-controlled trial to show full bioavailability. We want people to know that you can do the science if you're tenacious and know how, and have the resources.
Yeah.
So I'm in favor of using information and inspiration today. I didn't mention the omega-3 index, but you need to have a balance of omega-3 to 6 essential fats. There's also 8-oxoguanine. That's the most unusual test. That's a urine test to know whether your DNA is being oxidized. I would like to know your oxidized cholesterol or oxidized LDL. I don't care what your cholesterol and your triglycerides and your HDL and L. I don't. I haven't cared for 30 years. But I care whether you have damaged oxidized cholesterol or damaged oxidized LDL, because that causes atherosclerosis, coronary artery disease, heart attacks, strokes, little things like that. So we actually know enough to know what to measure and when to measure it. Now we just have to get on to doing it for everyone.
That's a whole separate podcast, but okay. Are there any specific times in someone's healing journey, whether it's a bone marrow transplant or they're starting chemo, or specific times where you'd say, listen, do not take supplements now before surgery, something like that? Any specific times in a journey that you'd say, this is the time where you should?
Let me tell you things that have come up. I have ulcerative colitis and I'm scheduled for surgery and I'm afraid to take a vitamin C cleanse. We have many people that did the vitamin C cleanse and canceled the surgery. I'm afraid that the herb is going to interfere with some medicine that I'm taking, and my doctor says, just take none a day. What does your doctor know? Is your doctor certified in any aspect of this? Look at the evidence. Whole books, many scientific articles. They point out when you nurture nature and you practice a kind of whole person healthcare and medicine, you get better results. Yes, again, this is a paradigm shift.
You know, Dr. J, I can't thank you enough for these words of wisdom, and I hope that they will help many of our patients share this with their doctors and help break down some of the walls that our doctors have put up. From my frame of reference in the field of industrial psychologists, I know that most physicians are naturally risk averse. So I want to invite every physician that happens to be listening to this podcast to dig a little deeper and learn more. As Dr. J has said, there is a reference and a resource that he's built. So can you share more about what you mentioned? I think it's the PIH.
Yes. PIH Academy is the PERC Integrative Health Academy. It's under the Health Studies Collegium. We have 5 years online, and we have the 6th year this year to do. The difference in our program is that it's all about primary upstream prevention. It is not about substituting a natural product for a toxic molecular product. The reason that we started it 5-6 years ago was because other people weren't doing it. They were charging to teach people how to use more natural therapies to treat symptoms. That's a step, a baby step. Health promotion, primary prevention, is the future. And I am confident that those who are willing to listen and dig in Take a look at the PIH Academy online, self-paced resource. I can tell you the last 100 or so colleagues that enrolled recently have been blown away by the quality of the content and the relevance to their practice. Because not only do we tell you the evidence, we explain how we explain this to consumers and to colleagues. And I also will encourage you to find the colleagues that are receptive and build their practice. Nothing like a full waiting room to encourage people to dig in more.
That's exactly right. And I know that more and more as patients advocate and force change, doctors will react because they will want to stay current and they will want to stay relevant.
Oscar, anything to contribute?
You asked about good resources. So having taken several of the PIH Academy courses, I can vouch that they are excellent, and they've taught me about physiology before pharmacology. I love that motto. And there's so much science there about how the body is supposed to work and function, and how do we just increase that nature within us, right? Like in the training, in the Madiri training, we learned, okay, let's dig in. Let's actually see the methodology in there. And for the studies that say that there was no effect and therefore the dosage should be none a day, well, they were using ridiculously low quantities that no herbalist would ever, historically, the eclectics or anyone else, the Ayurvedics, traditional Chinese medicine, they're using unreasonable, either very low or extremely high, and or injecting it, which, presumes that some chemical in a plant is going to make it into your bloodstream, which for the layperson might say, well, some of it would. Well, sometimes not. Like sometimes the medicinal therapeutics of an agent has nothing to do with it being in the bloodstream. It's that you put it in your mouth and your gut microbiome changed it into this other thing, which then changed it to this other thing in the mitochondria of your liver. And then that produced this chemical that, among other hundreds of chemicals, created this synergistic healing response of an orchestra, rather than like the piccolo finding its way to your bloodstream at a high screech that is, supposedly reproduced in a laboratory that has something to do with traditional usage, which is ludicrous, right? So, and then looking at outcomes, like we learned in the Madiri Academy, like there was one on St. John's wort, who you mentioned, and irinotecan, a pharmaceutical chemotherapeutic agent used a lot in colorectal cancers and other cancers. And they combined, the St. John's wort with the irinotecan or CPT11 AKA, and they found that because the cytochrome P450, 3A4 was upregulated, that there was less of this pharmaceutical in the bloodstream of the patient, and therefore the jump to conclusion was that it would not work as well. But yet, if you look at the data, which was not on the front page or the front abstract or the headline, the headline was St. John's wort interacts and inhibits the drug. And the assumption was that the drug didn't work as well. Yeah, no, it was true that it reduced the amounts in the bloodstream. But if you look at the outcomes, the patients that got both combo, their tumor shrank even more than the other ones. So you have to learn how to be critical about these things, and you have to learn how to understand that Google has these algorithms that if there's a negative study, that is the first one that shows up. There might be 12 positive studies on the positive benefits of combining pharmaceuticals with botanicals and nutraceuticals, but you are not going to find them. And if you do find them, it's you got to dig down deep into the data in the body of the paper, because it ain't going to be at the top. Because remember, who pays for these things? It isn't the Cilantro Board of America, right? It isn't the Turmeric Advisory Board, which is, all kinds of funded. Of course, these don't exist. So going back to the Flexner report and, who's funding these things?
We can certainly go back to there, but we can go back more recently to Marcia Angel, the editor-in-chief of New England Journal of Medicine. She publishes a book that says, in her lifetime, scientific integrity has gone from very high to very low. In her lifetime, the answer to the study is predictable from the way it's designed. That book was a good read. And then she wasn't invited to talk again. You may have never heard of her. She deserves to be remembered. Bernie Lown, a cardiologist in Boston. At one point, he was taking care of Brezhnev in Moscow, the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Brooklyn, and still had time for a Boston-based cardiac practice. When he was 94, he needed to go in the hospital. I wish the same for everyone. Given that I was such a skeptic, the fact that I've come as far as I have, to me, says you too can. In hindsight, it's clear. Be here now. Good title of a good book. Be in the moment. If you live in the past, you will probably get depressed. If you live in the future, you will probably get anxious. It's more than enough to be here in this moment. Now's the time we have to speed a transition from symptom reactive care to whole person caring.
Wow. You can't put it any more simply than that. And that's exactly right. And I can't thank you enough for joining us for this episode. I hope for everyone who listened, you learned something new. If nothing else, what I want you to know is use your resources, understand the research, dig a little deeper, use data to guide your treatment efficacy. Use, as Dr. J mentioned, there's all sorts of tests. If we're worried about liver, let's measure for liver. Let's actually look at what our fears are and use the data to guide if that fear is real or perceived, and continue to help not only treat our disease, but to heal the root causes. And that's what we're here today to really help you with. Oscar and Dr. J, would you leave our listeners with any other words of wisdom?
Dig a little deeper and listen to these giants of holistic and natural medicine that have collected from the forefathers before us, the guys that these guys mentioned that Donnie looked up to and Dr. Jaffe had lunch with.
Yes, and I do stand on their shoulders, and I'm happy to pay forward the good fortune that I have had and that I want everyone to enjoy, because I want to be dancing at 120 with my friends. I don't want to just be present and breathing. I want to show you that, and I'm glad to tell you that by measurements, biochemical measurements, I'm functioning like a 35 to 40-year-old person, which is about half my biological age. I think that that is the birthright of every person.
I hope I'm dancing with you at 120, Dr. J. I hope that I'm there.
I welcome it. Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. For all of our listeners, we hope that the knowledge bombs we dropped on you today will help you live a long and happy and healthy life. May you live long and lucky.